everyone, welcome back to another video. If you're new here, my name's Emma, and if you're not new here, we have another reading vlog challenge. This video idea came to me because in the month of February with Valentine's Day and it just being the month of love, I was super in the mood for romance books, so I thought it would be fun to challenge myself to only read romance books in this reading vlog. That being said, I am filming this intro after the vlog is completed, and it is now March. I think initially I planned to post this a couple days after Valentine's Day and ended up taking way longer than I thought it would. So even though this reading vlog theme doesn't fit the vibe I was going for originally, since Valentine's Day has long passed, I still thought it would be fun to share this with you guys and bring you along for all the romance books I read throughout the month of February. I'll stop rambling now and we'll jump into the romance reading vlog challenge, and we're gonna be starting the video off with me finally starting the Chestnut Springs series by Elsie Silver with the very first book called Flawless. Crazy right now because I just did an everything shower, but I have now finished Flawless and I was not expecting to binge it the way I did. Like, I thought it would take me multiple days, but I basically finished it in one sitting, and I can already say I'm obsessed. I loved the book so much. I think currently I'm landing on like a 4.5 star for it, just because there was some things I didn't absolutely love about it, but overall I really enjoyed it, and I was expecting it to feel more like Hallmark movie vibes, but it was more of an emotional romance than I was expecting, and I liked that about it. I'm so excited to get to the rest of the books in this series, and part of me wants to pick up the next one right now because I know it's Cade and Willa's story, and I really want to get to that. But for the sake of this video, I am going to continue on to a different romance book. I do think I'm gonna go ahead and start Once Upon a Broken Heart by Stephanie Garber. I read the Caraval trilogy a couple years ago, and everyone's been telling me that the Once Upon a Broken Heart trilogy is even better, so I guess now is the time for me to finally learn what all the hype is about. I do know that Jax is in these stories and is like one of the main characters, and I loved him in the Caraval trilogy, so I have no doubt that I'm gonna love him in this as well. And so far with like challenging myself to only read romance, I'm really enjoying just like choosing books that are full of love and happiness and maybe a little angst and heartbreak too, but I just feel like it's so fitting for the current season with Valentine's Day coming up. So I'm gonna get started on Once Upon a Broken Heart, and I'll be back to update you guys with my thoughts whenever I have them. Hey y'all, so it has been quite a while since I gave my last update. I honestly don't even remember the last thing I recorded, but I think it might have been whenever I was starting Once Upon a Broken Heart, and I have finished that book and moved on to another one by now. But the reason I haven't given any updates is because I was not feeling well at all. I had pink eye, like just going through a lot, and A, did not look very good to be filming and sitting in front of a camera, but B, when I had pink eye, it like pained me to physically read a book. So I kind of switched over to audiobooks for a while. I ended up listening to the entire audiobook of The Endless War by Daniel L. Jensen, which is the 4th book in the Bridge Kingdom series, and even though I didn't plan on that book being in this reading vlog, it is a fantasy romance, so it still fits the theme of only reading romance, for this vlog, so I'll talk a little bit about it even though I didn't give you guys many updates along the way. If you guys don't know what the Bridge Kingdom series is, it's, like I said, a fantasy romance. I want to say it's classified as new adult or maybe adult, but it's full of tension and banter. It's enemies to lovers, which are all like some of my favorite things ever in books. I started it back in November and have been like working my way through the books and finally got to the 4th book, which I also think is the longest one, so I'm glad I did it on audio and I ended up really liking it. I think I gave it 4 stars, maybe 4.25 stars. And I feel like I've said this in a lot of my videos where I talk about this series, but I often hear people say that books 1 and 2 are significantly better than books 3 and 4 because you're actually following different sets of characters in those different books. But personally, I have enjoyed books 3 and 4 way more than I liked books 1 and 2. So reading this 4th book kind of felt like an epic conclusion to the series, even though I do think there may be more books coming out, but I'm not gonna say too much about it. I really loved it, and I did want to just mention it in this video since it is technically a romance book. Then I did basically end up binge reading Once Upon a Broken Heart by Stephanie Garber. I think in this vlog I showed me starting the book. That night, or those clips I showed, I think I only got like a chapter or 2 in, and then the next day was when I realized I had pink eye, and that's why I stopped filming. I stopped physical reading. I picked the book up again thinking I would just read a couple chapters and then like jump back on here to give you guys my thoughts and updates during the days when I was reading the book. But I ended up absolutely binging it because I loved it so much. So I apologize for the lack of footage on me reading that, but I feel like that's how I know it was such a good book, because I completely forgot to even pick up the camera and share my thoughts as I was going. I already knew I loved Stephanie Garber's writing because I had read the Caraval trilogy a while back, but this was definitely a million times better. Something about the way she tells the story and creates this world, it's so picturesque, and I just get sucked in and genuinely forget I'm reading. I feel like I'm transported to an entirely different world. And I knew a general premise going in, especially because I had read the Caraval trilogy and there's some overlap with characters, but it was definitely different than I was expecting it to be, but I liked that about it. Basically, Once Upon a Broken Heart is a YA fantasy romance series that's taking place in the same world as the Caraval trilogy, after the Caraval trilogy, and there's one character in particular that overlaps the stories, and his name is Jax, and I absolutely loved him in the OG trilogy, but this book made me love him even more. But the book is following our main character, Evangeline, and she wants to stop the wedding of her one true love because she obviously doesn't want him to get married to someone else. So she prays to the Prince of Hearts, who happens to be Jax, to get his help in order to stop this wedding, and the story kind of takes off from there. And like I said, I kind of had an idea of what the book was going to be about, and I thought that premise is kind of the plot line we were going to follow the whole time, but it branched off in so many different directions and was just 10 times more intriguing than I was expecting it to be. The tension and banter was unmatched. I eat up an enemies to lovers every single time, but low-key a YA enemies to lovers hits even harder than an adult one because it's even more of a slow burn, and I already want to jump into the 2nd book. And then there's 2 other books I've started reading that I have forgotten to give updates on, and the first one is The Songbird and the Heart of Stone by Carissa Broadbent. This is the newest book in the Crowns of Nyaxia series, and this is another one that I was not planning on reading for this reading vlog, but it is a fantasy romance, and I've just been listening to it on audio because, like I said, I had been dealing with pink eye and I still wanted to read, but it was just easier to do audiobooks. And I want to say I'm about halfway through that book, so I will definitely continue to include that in this vlog as I go, because again, it is technically romance. I just wasn't planning on that being a part of the video, but I'm just rolling with the punches at this point. And I absolutely love the Crowns of Nyaxia series, so I'm glad to be like reading that and getting to share my thoughts with you guys as I go. So far, I'm really liking it. It's very different from the first 2 books in the series. It is following a side character from the books we've gotten so far, and I've been very excited to get her story. The story is just playing out differently than I thought it would, and so far we haven't gotten very much romance at all, and I don't have a problem with a slow burn romance. I actually love a slow burn romance, but this is so slow burn that it's like very subtle tension, very subtle banter, subtle flirting. Like there's basically no connection or chemistry happening between our two main characters currently, so I'm very interested to see when that comes into play, or if there's going to be another book after this where the romance really takes off. But that's kind of just my thoughts so far. I am liking it though. And then the other book I'm currently in the middle of is a book I was planning on actually reading for this reading vlog, and that is Baggage Claim by Juliana Smith. And the reason I chose this one was not only because it was a romance, but I went on a ski trip with my husband and his family, and I thought, how fitting would it be to read a book that involves skiing when I'm going on a ski trip. We actually just got back. I'm currently about halfway through it, I want to say, and my plan is to finish this book on camera with you guys tonight and give my thoughts as I go. But my current thoughts are that I'm liking it a lot more than I thought I would. I was kind of expecting this to just be a mindless, palate cleanser-y, Hallmark type of romance read, but I've been pleasantly surprised so far. And the main character actually reminds me a lot of myself. One, because she is horrible at skiing, and from personal experience, just going on my first ski trip, I am also horrible at skiing. But there's just also a lot of other things about her personality that remind me of myself, so that's been really fun to read. Basically, the premise of this is that the main character, Olive, is flying home to visit her family for Christmas for the first time in 3 years because she had a falling out with her sister. She ends up next to this guy on the plane named Finn, and she tells him how she had told her family she had a boyfriend even though she doesn't. So since he's flying to the same place as her for the holidays, they strike up a deal where he will pretend to be her boyfriend in order to help keep her family off her back, and then it kind of evolves from there. It is odd to be reading this in February because it does take place at Christmas, and it's a lot more Christmassy than I expected it to be, but it's still really fun. I'm enjoying the characters, and I definitely think I can binge this and fly through it and finish it tonight. Before jumping into the rest of this vlog, I'm gonna insert a few clips of the ski trip we just went on, because going on the ski trip while reading this and the scenery like matching up was so amazing. Like, I could not have picked a better time to read this, and the whole time I was skiing I just kept thinking about this book. So here's a few clips from that ski trip before we resume the rest of the vlog. How I look or that I'm in the same outfit, but these are my jammies. It's the next morning. I just woke up. I did finish Baggage Claim last night, but I felt like I needed to sleep on it before I fully gave my thoughts to you guys, because as soon as I finished it, I ran to Goodreads and rated it 4 stars, and I think a lot of that comes from the fact that I was very surprised with how much I enjoyed it. I didn't think I was gonna dislike this book. I just thought this was like a palate cleanser romance that I was gonna read and then forget about, but I actually ended up being like really hooked in the story, which is kind of why I didn't end up giving updates last night, because I literally sat down, cracked this book open, and finished the rest of it. But upon reflection and sleeping on it, there are a few small bones I have to pick with it. And a lot of those bones I have to pick have to do with the male main character. When I started the book, I really loved him. I was like, this guy is awesome. But I think that's because the chapters when I was in the female's POV, he seemed great because she saw him as great. But then we got chapters in his POV and kind of got his inner thoughts, and a lot of them really bugged me. He's just very egotistical, and when we're in her POV, he comes across more as just like cocky and confident, which I thought was fun and added a lot to the banter and just like overall made the story better and the chemistry better. However, there was just some unnecessary things when we were in his POV. For example, at one point in the book, the two main characters get into an argument and he leaves and she's like in her car crying, and he walks up and sees her crying in the car. She doesn't notice him yet, And in his inner dialogue, he thinks to himself something along the lines of, it's nice to know that she's crying over me, that's how much I matter. And I'm like, that's a little narcissistic. Like, are you a manipulator? I'm not really sure, but something here feels toxic. And then another example is that our female main character deals with some body dysmorphia, and it's not mentioned much throughout the book, but at the end when she does kind of open up to him about it more, he has an inner thought that says something along the lines of, I'm gonna help her with her weight loss journey because I know how to help her get through this in a healthy way. And again, something about it just feels toxic and it rubs me the wrong way. Other than those little things, I did really enjoy him as a character. Overall, it was a really fun book. I had a great time reading it and I was pleasantly surprised with how much I enjoyed it. I did talk earlier about how I couldn't have picked a more perfect time to read this since I just went on a ski trip, but if it weren't for the ski trip, I would say the best time to read this is around Christmas time because this book heavily is centered around Christmas. But again, other than those small little things that bugged me, I did really enjoy this. It was fun, it was lighthearted, it had a little bit of emotional depth to it. And another thing that surprised me about it, I meant to mention, is that I thought this was, I mean, it is an adult romance, but I thought this was gonna be like an adult romance, like with spice. But it was a completely closed door romance, which I don't know that I've read many adult romances that are closed door. Actually, this might be the first adult romance I've read that's closed door. And I didn't mind it at all. I still really enjoyed the book. It was a fun time. I flew through it. I was debating which book to start next because I think I'm only gonna do like one more book in this reading vlog. And I think I've decided I'm gonna continue on with the Chestnut Springs series. And I'm picking up Heartless by Elsie Silver. If you saw earlier in the video, I did read the first book in this series and I absolutely loved it. I feel like I didn't really talk much about it in the video, but this is a cowboy romance, which I've never read before, but I'm eating up. The first book that I already read in this vlog follows Summer and Rhett. And Rhett is a professional bull rider and Summer's dad owns the agency that Rhett is signed on to, but Rhett's a little bit of a bad boy, he's a troublemaker, so his manager, aka Summer's dad, sends Summer to basically go be his babysitter and help improve his PR tactics and his appearance to the public, and things evolve from there. And right off the bat, I really loved it. I obviously loved it for the romance and the actual story of it, but just another little thing I loved is that I can already sense a found family developing because we start to get to know a lot of the side characters like the brothers and other family members as well as Summer's friends. And that's why I'm excited to start this book because this is following Cade, who is the oldest brother in the Eaton family. He's Rhett's older brother from the first book. And then our female main character is Willa, who is Summer from the first book's best friend. And while reading the first book, I absolutely loved Willa. I don't know that we ever even got on-scene pages of her in person, but there would be like little text thread snippets between Summer and Willa or phone calls, and I just love her personality already. So I'm really excited to jump into this book and interested to see the dynamic between Cade and Willa because Willa seems like she's such a spitfire, she's sassy, she's got a big personality, and then Cade is a single dad who's kind of like the grumpy type. So I feel like this book is gonna be Grumpy Sunshine and I'm really excited to get into it and to share my thoughts with you guys as I'm reading. I am still currently in the middle of the audiobook for The Songbird and the Heart of Stone. I think I have about 5-ish hours left in that, and I'll probably only be reading my audiobook when I'm like cooking or cleaning, doing that type of thing, so you probably won't get much footage of me actually reading that book, but I'll do my best to give updates for that one along the way. And once I've finished this book and The Songbird and the Heart of Stone, I feel like I have completed the romance challenge because that will be a lot of romance books back to back, and having so much fun with this challenge so far. But I could not wait a second longer to jump back into the Chestnut Springs series, so let's start Heartless.
weirdest camera angle ever, but the lighting is pretty decent right here, so we're gonna work with it. I just want to give an update that I am now almost done with The Songbird and the Heart of Stone. I think I have like an hour and some change left in the audiobook, and as I'm going through it, I really am wishing I would have just read the physical version, because I think there's a lot of details I'm not picking up on because I'm listening to it on audio and I'm not like fully locked in 100% of the time. And one thing about Carissa Broadbent's books are that they're so expansive and the politics and world building are so complex, which I love and I really enjoy, but I do think I'm missing little bits of information here and there, but it's not affecting my overall enjoyment of the story. The setting of where our characters are and kind of the plot line it's following is still very different from what I was expecting. I almost feel like I'm not even reading the Crowns of Nyaxia series. Like, if it weren't for the fact that the main character is a side character from the first two books, I would literally think this was an entirely different series. It's hard to give more detail to you guys because I want to keep this spoiler free, and since this is the third book in the series, I really can't explain anything without giving away what happens in the first two books. But I'm really enjoying it, and I'm so glad we're getting this character's story. It's so fun. It is a little bit of a grumpy sunshine, which I feel like I don't see very often in fantasy books. It is also an enemies to lovers, which is obviously a very popular fantasy trope, but I don't often see enemies to lovers paired with grumpy sunshine in a fantasy, but I'm loving that. I'm also about 65-ish pages through Heartless, and I'm not flying through this one as quick as I thought I would, or as quick as I flew through Flawless, but I'm just feeling like the setup for this one is a little bit slow, but I'm still really enjoying it. I'm just like ready to get into the meat of the story, I think. But the next time I have a chance to sit down and read some more of this, I will come back and update you guys with my thoughts and feelings and all of that. Finished Heartless by Elsie Silver. I think the last update I gave, I said I was almost done with it and maybe thought I was gonna finish it that day. It's now like a week later from that update, but the reason it took me like a week to finish the last little bit of this is, one, because I ended up going out of town for my friend's birthday over the weekend and didn't really get a chance to read. And then when I got home, my puppy Willa, which ironically happens to be the same name as the female main character in this book, ended up getting sick. She's totally okay now, but that was just like a lot to deal with, and I didn't have as much time for reading as I thought I would. But I now have finally finished this book. I literally was highlighting quotes throughout it. I don't know if you can see those highlights I have in there or like what pages I have stuff on, but I was just highlighting little quotes here and there that either like made me swoon, or I thought was funny, or I thought maybe was hinting to future books. I'm not really big on annotating usually, but I do love to highlight my favorite quotes and favorite moments in books that I really love. There's so much I wish I could say about this book, but I'm keeping this video spoiler free, so all I can really say is that I absolutely loved it, and I was torn whether I liked this book or the first book, Flawless, better, since as you saw I read both in this video, and I think I like this one just slightly more. I believe I gave Flawless a 4.5 stars, and I'm gonna go with a 4.75 stars on this book. I debated giving this 5 stars because I did kind of get 5-star feelings while reading it, and I'm just obsessed with the Chestnut Springs world and all these characters anyway. But since I even had to debate giving it 5 stars, I feel like that automatically means it's not a 5-star. That may not make any sense, but it makes sense in my head. Like, a 5-star book to me is like you close it and you know it's a 5-star. This one, I wasn't sure. I knew I really loved it. I knew I liked it better than the first book, but it's not quite a 5-star. We're gonna stick with a 4.75 star, but this series is quickly becoming one of my new favorites, and I have a feeling by the time I've finished the series as a whole will be a 5-star series. And I'm like low-key ready to already jump into the next book. Part of me just wants to binge this series, but I have so many other books on my physical TBR right now, so I'm not exactly sure when I'll be getting around to the next book in this series, but I am eager to. I can't really say much else, but I absolutely loved it, and I'm so glad I finally decided to pick up this series. And this was like the perfect book to round off this challenge of only reading romance, and I'm so glad I did this challenge in general because I love reading romance, but I don't usually read a lot of romance back to back. Like, I might throw in 1 or 2 just contemporary romances into my monthly reading, but literally February, I think I only read romances. That might be incorrect, but I think I literally only read romances in February, whether it was contemporary or fantasy romance, and it just confirmed to me how much I love the romance genre. So I'm so glad I did this video, but let me know if you guys would want to see me do other reading vlogs that are like genre challenges. I've been thinking about maybe doing only reading thrillers. I've done an only reading fantasy romance before. I could do only reading general fiction. I don't know. Let me know your ideas and I would love to make a reading vlog of it. That being said, this is the end of the video, so if you've stuck around to the end, thank you guys so much for watching. As always, I do have my Instagram, TikTok, Goodreads, and Lemonade linked in the description below if you guys would be interested in following me on those platforms and checking out my other content. Or you can head over to this channel and check out all the other videos I have posted currently, but also don't forget to subscribe so you can see more videos like this in the future. That's all for now, and thank you guys so much for watching. Bye guys!